Good evening, everybody. It is so great to see all of you. Thank you for coming out. You know, I have to say, because this is our first time back in the theater since what? Almost 3 years, you know. I know that, can you all hear me okay? I know that many of you have seen us from your own bedroom, maybe on your sofa, in your pajamas, some of our virtual shows. I hope you've been able to tune into those. We're going to continue to keep those posted, and people who are not able to be here this evening will be watching you, I hope. We're live streaming that. Thanks to John Fisher in the back. Thank you, John, for that. But it really is terrific to be here together, and I think it's a real credit to Didi and Jackson, Major Jackson, for getting you all out here. So I think they wanted to hear you read again, and it should be a great night of poetry. So thank you for being here. I want to let you know that Dr. Hein could not be here because he's out of the country. Otherwise, he'd be here with us tonight, too. And if you've been here before, you know, typically the program is that he very kindly asks me to read one of my own poems to start us out. But because he's not here, I think I can get away with not doing that. No, actually, the reason that I'm not going to do that tonight is that poetry lost a big name just this week. Charles Simic, who is a really beloved poet, passed away. And it seems fitting to take a minute and mention him, and I'm going to read one of his poems instead. And so Charles Simic published 30 books of poetry. He was a total rock star. He was a Serbian-American poet. He didn't speak English until he was 15 years old, and nonetheless, he wound up winning the Pulitzer Prize for one of his books and became our poet laureate of the United States. So he's a huge name in poetry. And he also is known for being a surreal poet. So it seems fitting to mention him, especially in this museum. His poems are often short. They tend to deal often with World War II, of which he was unfortunately very intimately exposed to all of that. And sometimes, though, he found a way to weave humor into his poems. So in a second, I'm going to read a short poem of his before introducing Didi and Major. But before I do that, I want to say a shout out to the city of St. Pete. Thank you for hosting our program. We're going on, I think, 9 years now, which is pretty incredible. Wow. Yeah. And to the Dalí Museum for being so supportive of the program, and to the many people who work not only for this program, but the other many programs that the Dalí does. Dr. Kim McCrary, where are you, Kim? Here you are. Thank you so much for all of your work on this program. Joy Garrett Douglas. Joy, where are you? Are you here somewhere? Or I think you might still be outside. And then she's at the door, okay. And then John Fisher, as I said, and just many others. Beth, who helps us with our promo. Thanks to all of you here at the museum, all the staff who helped with the program as well. So, all right, let me read this poem by Charles Simic, so we remember this amazing man. Oh, but first I have to tell you a quote he said. I love this quote. He says, poetry, three mismatched shoes at the entrance of a dark alley. He says the idea is to spin the wheel of metaphors and images until sparks of associations begin to fly for the readers. He says the poem I want to write is impossible, a stone that floats. One writes because one has been touched by the yearning for and the despair of ever touching the other. Okay, this is a short poem. It's called Coal. Dismembered angel in whose heart the earth is still on fire. The moon still has not been split off. Here is the message your long night announces. Everything my eye encompasses this instant, this fire, the cupped hand, this window with trees and miles of snow beyond it. Even this thought, this poem, will be compressed into a lump of your sleep for some other awakening. Thank you to Charles Simic. So we are so lucky to have Didi and Major back with us again. I'm going to first introduce Didi, and she'll read, and then we'll introduce Major after that. So Didi is the author of Moonjar, published by Hen Press in 2020, and My Infinity, coming up in 2024. Congratulations, that's wonderful. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, the Virginia Quarterly Review, the American Poetry Review, New England Review, Kenyon Review, and Alaska Quarterly, among other journals and magazines. She's had poems in Best American Poetry, Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, The Slowdown with Tracy K. Smith, and Together in Sudden Strangeness, America's Poets' Response to the Pandemic. She's a recipient of Poetry Society of America's Robert H. Winter Award and serves as an assistant professor at Vanderbilt University, where she teaches creative writing. Please help me welcome Didi Jackson.
Hello and good evening. It's good to see everyone live in this room. Oh my goodness. When you said we were here, we're back, it means we were here virtually, of course, last time. So we were here, in spirit, but now we're here with both bodies and spirits. So, and thank you, Helen, and thank everybody, Kim and Joy and John and everyone and the folks here at Dalí Museum. It's such an honor and true pleasure to be here. So I'm going to read some poems from Moonjar, and then I thought I would read some poems from My Infinity. And then hopefully end on a few new poems. One, the newest poem I've written, which the one we share a word with?
Yeah.
Some words? Okay, all right. We'll talk about that when the time comes. So, so I'll keep track of time the best I can. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is, if you're not familiar with my work, I will be reading poems that deal with suicide. And I just like to say that at the beginning in case, so I don't surprise, I guess, anybody with these works. So that's what my book Moonjars is about. Signs for the living. Sometimes, after the last snow in May, after the red-winged blackbird clutches the spine of the cattail, after he leans forward, droops his wings and flashes his epaulets, I imagine shouldering the yellow center lines of the road. Near the recently thawed pond, within a long channel of construction, a man holding a sign. One side says slow, the other stop. Joy and sorrow always run like parallel lines. Inside the house, when I leave the lights on, small white moths come like a collection of worship, pulsing their wings up and up the window, as if in a frenzied trance-like dance. Some dervishes, others the penitent on shaky knees. The first few years after my husband's suicide, I wanted to be the penitent. I thought I deserved all the pain I could feel. The drill of roadwork in late summer was a welcome grinding music. Now the yellow center lines are flung like braids behind me. Can you hear me okay? Is the volume good? Is that okay? So some of the poems I picked, I taught art history for many years, AP art history, and so I try to think of some that might be, some ekphrastic poems. We are in a museum after all here. And this one, I mean, I don't think I have anything to say about it except that it's after learning about the vandalism of the giant painting Guernica and the person who spray painted on that painting, and he spray painted the phrase "kill lies all." So my poem is titled "Kill Lies All." After his death, my hair did not grow. My nails peeled and flaked. My bones were lifted into a sack upon my legs. Even my muscles decayed from the lack of wild oranges and sweet tea. This was the new myth of my life. When visiting Spain, a cricket was loose in my kitchen. Its chirp was like my name, like the words yes, yes. But what could a dead woman know of yes? That summer, one cricket became two, two became four. It was then I memorized the trill and grind of my name. Like a vandal with a can of red spray paint, I could scrawl the words "kill lies all" across my Guernica. Who will be the bull, the horse? Who the severed head and arm? Under the bald lamp, like an eye, I will expose old scars and breastfeed a shadow of myself. Thank you. Thank you. I also thought I would pick some poems, Florida poems. I lived in Florida for 40 years. I lived in the Orlando area. I taught high school for 20 years in Florida, up in that area. And I still have family there. I have family in Jacksonville, New Smyrna Beach. My son's here in Tampa. So I still have family kind of sprinkled all over the state. So this poem is titled "After a Visit to New Smyrna Beach, Florida." Even the ocean's relentless roar can be a kind of wail. The stars above the breakers, tiny archipelagos of agony. I can grieve here or in the north. At dawn, crows gather at the ocean's edge. Such a contrast to the day's white gulls who, papery and weightless, hover above the whimper and moan of the shoreline. I don't like to write about the ocean. It reveals its emotions too easily. But here I am, closer to the place of your death than I prefer to be. It rains every afternoon, and thunderheads build like ashy skyscrapers. The ocean litters its shore with its dead, that visitors collect in buckets and pockets and carry home. I never buried you. Instead, I gave the urn to your family. You believed in no God. I believed in the clockwork of waves. Still do, I guess, hoping they somehow will hurry time, or at least for now, definite. So thank you. I moved to Vermont in 2016. So when I talk about the North, I mean the North. And getting used to snow, was a whole other thing for me. And also I miss the sky that rains at 3:00 every afternoon. I just miss that. I miss that thunderstorm and the rain. Yeah. Up north, when they say it's going to rain, it's like a mist. It's like 100% rain. It's like mist. Here it's like 100% rain, torrential downpour. True. So it's funny. Let's see. I'm going to read the title poem from the book titled "Moon Jar." And a moon jar, I love the concept of this, and I explain it in the poem, so I don't want to explain it too much before I read it. But it's this ceramic piece it is created in two pieces, but when it's fired, it's combined into one, when it's one sphere. But it's beloved for its imperfections when it's in the kiln. So what comes out of the kiln, all the warping and the pocks and all those things that come out for this piece of ceramic, it's beloved for its imperfections. And I just love that idea. I just love that idea so much. I mean, I just wish maybe if we all were better with our imperfections, and I'm going to put quotation marks around those because that's, a subjective idea anyway, that what are imperfections really, right? So Moon Jar. My wedding ring is missing one small diamond, and I like it that way, a reminder of the imperfect in all of us, like that keyhole size of grief that remains crystalline. In Korea, ceramicists for centuries have made moon jars, testimony to the virtue of modesty, asymmetrical warping on the wheel, slumping in the pine-heated kiln, impurities when fired, black dots and pocks on its surface like freckles on skin. I have been kept awake so many nights by the moon, its pull on the pines and night birds, and who, like a monk, keeps a sharp order of time. Never a perfect sphere, the milky moon jar joins two clay hemispheres into one. When the light of the moon finds me, I am the color of everything in the winter night. So, thank you. So I'll read some poems from My Infinity, and I'm trying to think of what maybe the theme of reckoning with death and trauma continues in this book, but also I'm really. Do I need to? Oh, thank you. I was like, maybe I'm too loud, or maybe I can hear my P's hitting into this, by the way. Every time I say a P, I can hear it kind of pop a little bit, so I apologize. But I'm also really fascinated with this artist, which I'll talk about when I read this poem, named Hilma af Klint. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with her work, but I'll introduce her just a little bit. But I see some nods out there that might know her work. So, and she too was interested in life, the afterlife, the possibilities of the afterlife, and there's some similarities. And she was doing her work right around the time Dalí was born. So I thought that would be a kind of interesting parallel. Mm-hmm. But first, I'll read a poem titled Bubalink. And the Bubalink's a bird that was facing some endangerment because of the mowing of fields. And with climate change, farmers are able to mow multiple times, and so there's not allowing for the nesting habits of certain birds. And the Bubalink is one of them. There was some good news for the Bubalink in Vermont. I'll let you know that at the end in the reveal. So the Bubalink. In a meadow as wide as a wound, I thought to stop and study the lesser stitchwort's white flowers, lacing up boot-level grasses, when I was scolded in song by a black and white bird whose wings sipped air, swallow-like, until he landed on the highest tip of yellow dock, still singing his beautiful warning, the brown female with him in fear. The warning was real, the anniversary of my husband's suicide. What was the matter with life? Sometimes when the wind blows, the meadow moves like an ocean, and on that day, I was in its wake. I mean, the day in the meadow. I mean, the day he died. This is not another suicide poem. This is a poem about a bird I wanted to know, and so I spent that evening looking up his feathers and flight, spent most of the night searching for mating habits and how to describe the yellow nape of his neck like a bit of Gothic stained glass, or the warm brown females with the dark eye line. How could I have known? Like so many species, they too are endangered. God must be exhausted. Those who choose life, those who choose death. That day, I braided a few strips of timothy hay as I waited for the pair to move again, to lift from the field. And what? Live? The dead can take a brother, a sister. Not really. The dead have no one. Here in this field, I worried the mowers, like giant gorging mouths, would soon begin again, and everything would be as it will. Yeah, but the good news is that the farmers have been subsidized in Vermont to delay the mowing until after the nesting season. I mean, but I still was really worried about the Bubalink and the pair. I was like, oh God, what will happen to them when they mow this field?
Yeah.
So that is the good news. That is the good news.
Birds.
Save the birds. Yeah. So my time up in Vermont, we live in the Green Mountains. We have a house in the Green Mountains, and we returned there. And the natural world was just so inspirational to me, and all new. I mean, after growing up in Florida since I was, like 6 years old, it was a whole new environment: snow, the natural world, everything. And so I love. It was like I was so hungry, like a sponge, learning about all of that. So this is titled "Spring Peepers." And these guys are little frogs that I find fascinating. All right. I try to record their song, lifting from pines and birches. One solitary note, shrill, then 3, trill, trill, then 12 or 20, all at once, like a reunion of women at the kitchen table, my aunts and grandmothers with wine in hand and cigarettes bouncing to the syllables of the names in their stories. Their ash flick of grief. Why is desk so melancholy? A vesper of tree frogs begins with or without me. I often sit and watch the end of the day turn to a steely gray. I often sit and watch the end of the day turn to a steely gray. Those women each claim their widowhood, like the X on the back of the peeper. We are all marked one way or another. Maybe we carry a sign from birth, maybe from far away. Each woman in my family has buried a husband. In that line, I am the last. Bits of night begin to unravel as the song swells and slowly covers the sky. Thank you. Oh, and so Hilma, she was born in the mid to late 1800s, and she was 40. I mean, I could do the math right now, but I'll save you all from watching that. So she was 44 when she started this big project, and she started with seances. She was doing these seances with these 5. Well, there's a total of 5, so 4 other women, and they were fascinated with trying to, reach the other side, see what's beyond life. And for various reasons, they were interested in this. She lost a sister very young, so she became very interested in it. And I know there's a painting here at the Dalí that has the DNA spiral. And this time for her, things that were unseen had suddenly become seen, right? So X-rays and the idea of atoms, or all these things that were normally just invisible and just maybe ideas really became tangible. And so to these women, why not the afterlife? Why not the other world? So they were attempting to do these seances. And then she was doing automatic writing and did contact these higher beings. And was told, she writes about this, she says she was told, to create a temple with all these paintings. And then the Guggenheim had a really amazing exhibition of her work in that spiral space, crazy enough, it was before the pandemic, so like 2018, I think. So it was just amazing. Her work is gorgeous. I would recommend it. But I thought I would read this because I felt with that painting here at the Dalí, the time periods, similar time periods, even though Dalí was born at the same time, she started this project. I thought that was really serendipitous. So, the automatic writing of Hilma af Klint. And I have an epigraph. It was not the case that I was to blindly obey the high lords of the mysteries, but that I was to imagine that they were always standing by my side. And that's Hilma. She wanted to see the invisible, those interstates of light beams that clicked easily into place like the months on a calendar, the sightless lines that marked then punctured a hole into the next life, a place without grass or dirt, without all that is tangible in this world. She learned the price would be high to enter the trance and talk with those who were able to drag themselves from bliss towards all they want to forget. She pounded on the door to unlock another reality. Look at her hands as they scribble the words decipherable only to her. dictating in automatic text the language of the dead, like the alarm calls of birds or the soft companion calls they make to keep track of each other. Look at her wrist spiraling like a small snake sliding from its skin. See as she catches with each character all she needs to know with her pen. Another woman hungry and ruthless for knowledge. Listen to the four others of Defem. Warn her of the dangers as they watch her rhythmic and repetitive marks fill notebook after notebook. Her sister dead for over 2 decades, still a shadow on her wall at night. Notice there is always room at the seance for one of the high masters to request yet another spiral, another garden-banded snail shell, and a continual growth, the tail of the double helix forming the exact ladder rungs she will need to finish her temple. Thank you. Thank you. One of my students, I'm going to read this poem, one because I'm back in Florida, and I had a student who was killed in a murder-suicide, and I dedicate this poem to her, and I haven't read it in a long time, and I wanted to read it tonight. It's titled The Burning Bush, and it's to Brianne Ort, born in 1979 and died in 2016. An entire alphabet can be stuttered in a few gunshots. So often it's the boyfriend spiraling down the chamber, his words lodged in the barrel behind the bullet, fast and frenzied. We all wonder why the trash at the dump never stops burning, why the blind look to the wind, the rain stumbles outside the window, the tombe before the heavy pas de bourrée of storm. Cathedral de San Marco in Venice speaks 2 languages, Greek and Latin, and I'm jealous of those with 2 tongues, like the white pine, whose trunk cracks and whose needles whistle to the bilingual nuthatch. The sun torches the tips of the trees on a descent from a world where no woman is safe. Even the man who loved her wanted her dead. The burning bush is an invasive species, yet cardinals and chickadees flock to its red seeds and flamed leaves in the fall. I should cut it to a stump and rot its roots, but instead I admire its show of color, watching the damage as it spreads. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. I'll read a couple new ones, I think. Maybe 2 more. Is that good on time? Am I doing good? I'm trying to keep track of time. Yeah. So these are brand new. They might make their way into, who knows? Actually, I have 3. Yeah. One is written from when we were in Greece a couple summers back, and we were in this town of Vamvako, which was a town they were trying to revitalize, actually. A lot of the residents had left, and they were doing these efforts to revitalize the space, and there was a cathedral there named after the saint. I'm trying to pronounce it the best I can, Harlambos. It's spelled much different than that, but it's a Greek Orthodox church, and so inside are just all these paintings of all the different saints, but interestingly enough, also how they died really tragically, so of course I'm drawn to it. Okay, so glowing with joy, and that is the saint's name. Harlambos is translated to glowing with joy. And I bear the wounds of all the battles I avoided by Fernetta Pessoa. Yeah. I pause and light a candle as I enter St. Harlambos, whisper a small prayer, something that might match the smell of incense and stillness. I'm alone in this church, so I sit in the nave, under the dome, under hundreds of eyes the bodies frozen in moments of wonder or awe or torture or merely life on each inch of the walls. Outside, the wind rips against the marble, but the Theotokos sits still as a cat, her baby with one arm raised, like lifting a tiny flag, as two angels with arched backs flank the pair, their bodies manifesting the questions we all have. So, how do we endure this suffering? Harlambos flayed alive, thanking his torturers for scraping off his old body and renewing his soul. And though this saint can protect from the plague, the walls here are spotted with mold, already eating at the gowns and the stiff floating bodies, the paint peeling like small wounds. And since I'm alone, I consider these wounds, spores lodged inside us. This is when I can't see the whole. I only see next cell to next cell, like the row of images on the iconostasis, each their own story of suffering. So specific, part of all suffering. Why we remember decapitated heads and severed arms, saints who lost their eyes, their breasts, their tongues. What is our suffering then? The voices of workers on midday break filter in with the clerestory's light as they take a beer or two in the nearby cafe. And the swallows still glides like a blessing under the groin vault of the portico, her babies calling with gurgles, liquid and joyful. Thank you. I want to read this one. I want to read two more, but I want to read this one. We didn't rescue. We have a rescue dog, and I'm trying to write about this rescue dog because he's amazing and feisty and terrible. He's a terrier, so he kind of holds that reputation of being a terror. So this is titled "The Party is Downstairs," and it's for my dog. All right. The rescue dog, who is locked inside a room, away from the party, sits as close as he can, shimmies his rear to the place the jamb and the door join, presses his back to the needle of light that escapes from the hallway, and there begins his dream, as muted barks and ripples of chase crash through his sleeping body. He forges a second and third head and protects his small threshold, sharpens his knife mind, and drinks in the multitudes of his enemies. Just yesterday, he chased an ink blot of light from the opening glass kitchen door and ran along the wall, incessantly licking at the spot into which he knew it must have disappeared. Surely he knows who least to worry about. They say dogs can tell a bad person. It's all perspective or pheromones. To have that chickpea nose, the terrier goatee of Trotsky, the eyes like two black olives, the ability to separate out in advance those who might cause pain. In how many lifetimes could that skill have saved me? My friend, who when helping me build bookshelves, yelled at my dog and then his wife, her cocoa-colored hair covering half her face. And though this stray weighs only as much as a jug or two of milk, his sleep breath is mixed with the desolation of train windows and of abandoned homes and the empty streets from which he was born. Little stray guy. All right, last poem, I promise. Okay. So there is this thing that the birders say that if the first bird you see in the new year is going to be your bird for the year. It's like your totem bird, I don't know. And so this is a little bit about that. And then it has a particular word that we were working on trying to get into some poems. And that word is excoriation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, okay. So the first bird, what? Okay, the first bird I see in the brand new year is a chickadee. And they don't have them in Florida. I'm like in love with the chickadees, and they're not here. It's so weird. So brand new year is a chickadee. And according to birders, is now my theme bird, industrious, curious, No jukebox of melody, but instead a 2 or 3 note simple song, the dropped notes of "Hey, sweetie," outside our bedroom window, where we rest a moment, naked, our desire rooting us to each other, our ankles like anchors, your coined eyes on my Willendorf figure, my freckles like dashes of oregano. It is winter, and the heat of the room tricks us into cracking a window to allow the smallest ribbon of yellow to touch the bed, then to move across your face like a honeyed blessing of mercy. I know the days of the calendar itch like fledglings, each at the lip of their nest, ready for flight, and that your parents told you not to wish your life away. But how esoteric of them, the old, though now we are the age they were, lip to lip, nose to nose, belly to belly. And on this cold day, I want to eat you, an excoriation of your body in the manner of the Eucharist. For if you become part of me, then I will know and help carry all of your suffering, and you mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Didi. What a wonderful reading, and I can't wait for your book to come out. Do you know when it's coming in 2024?
In the spring.
Okay,
No, I don't
okay.
know when yet.
Okay.
Yeah, spring 24.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I love all the birds. I think I may have mentioned to you last time that my ringtone on my cell phone is the veery. If some of you may know that bird, it's up in North Carolina, and it has a sort of spiraling down sound. Although I do need to change it. it's been too long. It's getting a little annoying. But they are amazing sounding. But that was a wonderful reading, and I look forward to hearing more about it and your crafting of your new book as well when we get into the Q&A. So, I noticed when I was looking out, we have a lot of writers here tonight.
I was going to ask that.
So yeah, thank you all so much. First, I want to do a shout out to our new poet laureate who is here in the back. This is Gloria Munoz. Gloria. Thank you for being here. Gloria does so much great stuff in our community with poetry, and we're very excited to have you in this role. So, but there are several. Sterling Watson, Sterling's here, and Dean. I can't see where everybody is. Wave your hands. And Sylvia is here, and Rhonda is here. Sylvia Cabello, Rhonda. Show me your hands. Hervey is here somewhere. Yep. I'm maybe missing people because I can't. Oh, Chantel Smithson and Ann Ney are somewhere in the house. So anyway, thanks to all of you and those I may have missed because I can't see as well from here. But I really appreciate all of you coming out. And I've already bragged about the good questions you guys tend to generate when we get to the Q&A, so don't let me down on that. Next, we have Major Jackson, and we are thrilled to have Major. And one of the things I'm super excited about that I just learned about because of your post on Facebook is that Major is the new host for The Slowdown, which if you don't know The Slowdown, is a podcast that's produced through a relationship with Poetry Magazine and the Poetry Foundation. And it's currently hosted by Ada Limon, who is our U.S. Poet Laureate. But Major is the new host, which is really huge. I mean, it's great. Bob Devin Jones, where are you? Are you still here? There he is. Sorry, I missed you back there. Glad you're here too. So yeah, The Slowdown is, if you haven't heard it, please check it out. It's really wonderful. The host will do a short essay, if you will, about a topic of his or her choosing, and then reads a poem by typically another poet. Maybe it could be your own also.
No, never.
No? Okay.
That's in the contract.
that somehow ties into the essay. And it's to get you, when you listen to it, the whole point is to get you just slow down. And it comes to your inbox every day. And, it's a cool thing. So tune into that, and you'll be lucky to hear Major doing that. So Major Jackson is the author of 5 books of poetry, including The Absurd Man, published in 2020, Roll Deep, Holding Company, Hoops, and Leaving Saturn, which won the Cavicum Poetry Prize for a first book of poems. His edited volumes include Best American Poetry, 2019, which was I went back and looked again at your introduction in that. Wow. Yeah, that's an art form all in and of itself. Ranga for Obama and Library of America's County Cullen Collected Poems. He's also the author of A Beat Beyond, the selected prose of Major Jackson, edited by Amor Coley. And he's the recipient of fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Guggenheim Foundation, the NEA, and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. Major Jackson has been awarded a Pushcart Prize, a Whiting Award, a Writers Award, and has been honored by the Pew Fellowship in the Arts and the Whitner Bynner Foundation in conjunction with the Library of Congress. So these are all really big deal awards. He's published poems and essays in American Poetry Review, The New Yorker, Orion, Paris Review, Plowshares Poetry, Poetry London, and that he lives in Nashville, Tennessee, where he is the Gertrude Conaway Vanderbilt Chair in the Humanities at Vanderbilt University. And he serves also as the poetry editor for the Harvard Review. So no sloucher, this guy. Please join me in welcoming Major Jackson.
I was going to.
You want me to bring him
I'll bring him over. Okay.
Oh my God. He's taking your seat. He can take your spot.
Good evening. How are y'all doing? Do you need to refresh your wine and other beverages? I wouldn't be upset if you got up at some point and patronized. I want to thank the Dalí Museum once again and St. Pete for always the warmth and hospitality, and that you have a great steward here of poetry, and I want to thank Helen for all the work that she does, both on the page and off the page. I'm going to read 20 poems in the next 15 minutes. I'm going to start off with a poem called The Innocent and Quiet Rooms. And this is really about Dalí. The paltry landmark, the fallen law, the intricate design in a Celtic cross. The wearer of no crown, the one who dances when no one's around, who gathers his words like molten fire, whose thoughts entangle barbed wire. Whose feelings are chalked on clouds, whose sound lives in the mouth. Like an aside, he with a meteor's tail for spark, though the poor rule the dark. I come without an accomplice, wearing a robe, dense with little pretense, so the meek sing from a green slope on a hill, where a laundress exonerates and doesn't go for the kill, where sheets flap like heavy birds in the house of the Lords. This is a poem also art-inspired. It is a poem borrowing an image from Chagall. Can you picture Chagall? Those two lovers floating in the air. The goats, yes. Most days I'm full of spacious meadows, golden fields of yarrow and lupine undulating like a veil of free nihilists. Most days I hold it together like the hairpins in my mother's head. Then Other days, it is as though I am floating sideways in a sour aquarium. Most days, I have the faith of coffee makers. Most days, I sit side saddle and drink and blow fire. Then other days, it is as though I am a line of ants disappearing into a half-eaten peach. Some days, I am a scholar of tiny differences and visit museums where I am a hostage to the makers, whose indelible dreams arrive like ecstatic breezes, especially on the fourth floor, where I stair-step my way to the gilded halls and peer deep into the still lives of fruit and water pitchers and pheasants, which remind me of my mortality, except I would have included dishcloths and detergent next to a carcass of a rotisserie chicken. All suffering goes this way. We are poor devils made wise by the heft of our wrecks. Some days I scatter a fistful of stars out of words. Thinking in Swedish. I could sit the rest of my life listening to Aretha and pretend to be an oracle and maybe get a handle on members of Congress who arrived squeaky clean with valiant notions of purifying the land, thick with bribes, but erred and fell off walls to become an abandoned prairie of Humpties. But I've forgotten my escape routes, the oaks and sequoias, and live as though sugar were my only stimulant. I'm just not myself this morning. I anticipate the journey to work as a voyage over 7 seas. The tea kettle whistles on about Puritanism, but my insides are tender as a cocktail party with no one present. I've a pea coat peeling in a dark closet, and the arrow points due north, where I must go. But first, tell me about the promiscuous fountains in Sweden and how they remind us of the poets and all their animal sorrow. On listening. If you could listen to my thumbs, then you'd hear the history of oranges. And if you borrowed your neighbor's corkscrew, you'd hear all her sorrows. And if you rode your tourist bicycle northwest along Rue de Lyon, arriving at Place de la Bastille, you'd hear 3 centuries of curses, the Jacobins testing their aging throats. And perchance your eyes, widened by love, took in the whole sea that is your wife's mind. You'd brush and shake the sands out of her hair, collect them in your lap, then jar the beige ground so you can study their infinite light. You need not enact silence or testify with a tongue like a yoke, with no fire beneath it. Just let the little peanut of your voice blossom into a hike below a crest of pine tops, a way of listening that calms the blood flowing at the center of your marrow. It must be the supermarket in me. It must be the supermarket in me, all lit from inside, full of wide aisles and thoughtful shelf stocking, where you'll find my feelings and emotions and memories. That's why on the outside I look so ordered and put together. My inner supermarket contains an old world butcher shop and a fish market with no trace of the slaughter. Shoppers arrive with an unfathomable hunger, which I relieve by offering freshness, quality, and value. Some are penniless and can only fantasize, licking their lips at rows of artisanal cheeses and meats behind glass display cases. The cloth-bound breeze and goat at ropes of cured salami and prosciutto. Still they taste. I offer free samples at stations throughout my supermarket, so people will come to know and like me. In the produce department, many test my pears and avocados for ripeness. In the floral area, they sniff. Some walk off with my bouquets. I contain cheerful baggers who will escort you to your car. At times, truthfully, I dislike this about myself, forever accommodating. I've not always had a supermarket in me. It began when the church in me lost its congregation and when I lost my mother's love to cocktails and other stimulants. There is no place for anger in my supermarket. I keep it in the back room with a sign that says, "No trespassing, employees only." It's a way of being in the world, a self full of checkout lines and refrigerators until someone runs through me, knocking down my pyramids of canned goods or panic shopping, leaving empty aisles. Ode to everything. You are a bunch of writers. That's pretty cool. You got the joke. Somehow, I have never thought to thank the ice cream cone for building a paradise in my mouth. And can you believe I have never thought to thank the purple trout lily for demonstrating its six-petaled dive, or the yellow circle in a traffic light for illustrating patience? My bad. In my life, I have failed to praise the postman, whose loyalty is epic, the laundress who treasures my skinny jeans and other garments, and the auto repairman who clings a wrench inside my car, tightening her own music. Were my name called, and I were summoned on a brightly lit stage to accept a little statuette, after staring in utter disbelief, I would thank my dentist, as well as my neighbor, who sits vigil beside the dying, far away from the lights, and my fourth grade teacher, who brought down 3 taped rulers on my hands as punishment for daydreaming out a window during an exam I already completed. Mea culpa. Now that I know the value of the peaks across from Flanders Hill, I will forever express reverence for their green crowns. I will never fail again to say small devotions for the scar on a friend's face that lengthens when I walk into a room. All right, this will be my last poem. Huh? 20 minutes? Oh, I said 20. Oh, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Global energy. Okay, 2 more. Global energy. Give me the fashionably linen-clad scoundrels and dreamy radicals lounging at a poolside party in a Hockney painting. Give me those whose damp freckles vibrate along jawlines like flares of innocence. I want virtue to descend like the beauty of a lemon tree, and to gasp at least once a day at the miracle of vitality that is my friend's smile. Money has no cadence here. The wardrobe of the rich is like an imperial shadow that covers the history of gun trading and masculine footsteps. At 5 p.m, my first prayers return to the zest of my mind, where a tundra resides. Give me yellow cornfields and villas above Costa del Sol. My whole world blooms like a theater of exotic flowers. You guys are just too kind. Yeah. Really? Okay. All right. I was ready to get into some talking. It's called Holy Terror, and I think this has the excoriated word in it. We belong to a Monday writing group, and we exchange words. And so if you remember that poem, you might. I think this is it. It might be in there. It's called Holy Errors. I love the precision of the lips, how they come alive inches away from another pair of lips, how they govern desire and hunger and feed on what is closest to the mouth. And to know it all started with a jukebox, with a yellow dome fed by coins, or a DJ who crossfades 2 songs as you uncross your ankles, delicate and light in front of you, then arise so that you can get a little dancing of the hips with your arms outstretched, wide, and your face bright as a coniferous forest, whose spruces and scrub pines root deep into dune sands, and there you are, grounding alongside them. I probably should change that word. And when the lips kiss, you can smell oregano and garlic coming from the restaurant way down the street on the corner, where you can detect someone having just dropped a slice of focaccia bread, but picked it up and dusted it off and dipped in a glass bowl of olive oil and fed to eat between the lips of their beloved after having taken a bite themselves. Such gentleness and mercy your parents never told you or showed you, but excoriated you like an axe falling upon wood until you were nothing more than a figure of holy terror in their eyes, yet were only one who needed nothing more than a saving touch, light kisses billowing around your face like summer drapery. Ode to allies. Ode to allies. They know our curvaceous dreams, and they know the hour the clock stopped, yet how the minutes of the past churns inside us. They know how we sleep with our mouths open like the entrance of a mile-long tunnel ready to admit a locomotive. They know the wishes we make when we blow out candles. When we are stung by a bee, they fetch pliers from a dusty storage bin and pull the stinger, gentle as a surgeon, and gaze on it as though it were a fallen eyelash or clef note in a musical composition. They know how we are jostled by gale-force winds and rising waters, and after the storm, the best path out of the rubble and collapsed roofs. Allies know the thing our mother said and the thing our father did. They know our bungled storms and marriages. Allies guide us to dance floors, even if we move as though with cloven feet, so that we can exist in the ordinary miracle of our bodies, like the women in a Rubens painting. Allies knit themselves into the vertebrae of our spines. They are not vain, nor aloof, like senators or philosophers who are buoyed by cameras and seminars. They carry sandbag after sandbag so we won't drown. Allies are endless with their love. It is as though they walked unbidden out of a painting or a prayer with their broad shoulders like 2 homelands. Truly my last poem, thank you. Making things. Suddenly, I had to skewer all my prayers and slow roast them in the open air kitchen of my imagination. I had to shovel fire into my laughter and keep my eyes from blinking. I had to fuss like my grandmother's simmering storms, flour on a wooden island, pans lined with parchment, cast iron skillets, and whisk-fleck gravy. I had to move like a ballet dancer, but without the vanity and self-consciousness of tradition. I had to blur my scars so I could write into time and carry the sensation of walking like a morose and heavy American sporting a yellow ascot over Pont Saint-Michel. I want to be all razzle-dazzle before the dark cloak one arrives for a last game of chess. My font of feelings is a waterfall, and I live as if no toupees exist on earth, or masks that silence the oppressed, or anything that does not applaud the sycamore's tribute to the red flame, like the heat beneath my grandmother's pots, who never raised a ghost, but a storm. So look at me standing on the porch, laughing at the creek, threatening to become a raging river.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Take your photos. That was awesome.
I love that.
Major, thank you so much for that.
I'm gonna
Good,
steal that. Taking that home.
such a good reading. Thank you. Thank you. We will segue into our Q&A. But maybe before we do, I want to just remind you that Tombola Books is in the back or right out front, ready to sell books by Didi and Major. And I should also thank them because, again, they do so much for our literary community. They're always there for all of our writers, and we're lucky in St. Pete. We've got several good bookstores, but Tombola is really terrific. So buy their books. And the other thing I want to make sure that you know about, you'll find some cards on the book table for Writers in Paradise, which is the writing conference at Eckerd College, which will be running all through next week. So actually starting on Saturday evening. And the evening readings are free and open to the public. So come join us there. You're going to hear more of these wonderful poets. You're going to hear Sterling Watson read from his new novel, which is already winning all kinds of awards and creating a buzz in New York. So yeah, come to the conference if you can. A lot of good stuff going on there. You'll see a card on the table for that. But okay, I want to just say one thing. I'm so struck by the use of metaphor from both of you guys. I mean, your metaphors are just so amazing. So I'm going to start out with a question, and then I hope that you all will come up with some of your own. Could you both talk a little bit about your use of metaphor? I think it was Aristotle who said the essence of poetry is metaphor, right? I hear it in your poems for sure, for both of you. So will you talk a little bit about your use of metaphor and how you use them in your poems?
Sure. You sure? You want to go?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay.
Well, metaphor for me is, most of my life is boring, and metaphor allows me to kind of be Dalí-esque, or to be a little bit more kind of adventurous. But there's a practical function for metaphor for me, and that is to kind of introduce, possibly yoke together two ideas that doesn't exist before. Dead as a doornail is very, very familiar, but if I can come up with something else that dead might be, then I've introduced something kind of new in the world. So it's really an active site of invention when I'm writing, and it feels for me the most playful. Is where I can kind of surprise myself. I also think in introducing something hopefully new, hopefully it also kind of shifts our thinking a little bit, meaning it's not just a reflection of my personality or my sense of wit, but I'm throwing something out there like all of us that hopefully might shift our minds just a little bit more towards the authentic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll add to that in that it is my favorite device when I'm reading anybody else's work. It's like the thing I'm gravitated towards.
You can hear it in your
It's my favorite thing. It's the thing I get so excited about. I mean, I love it when I'm reading a poem and I'll read a metaphor and it's so surprising, I'll gasp, or I'll just get really jealous and be like, why didn't I think of that? But there's that too. But it's just, it's my favorite device. And I think, I don't know, but I love to think of the world in metaphor. I feel like I walk around with my brain in metaphor or something, already. So it's, I think it's a lot of fun to try to think of how things are unrelated and then you put those two things together in some really fresh new way. So it is really exciting.
It makes me, I'm thinking about the metaphor in a way without the reader is like dressing up and standing before a mirror. We need the reader to kind of bear witness to that level of kind of play. Or that dressing up of some idea or language. It's also a great way of not staying in the abstract. Abstract ideas only, as we know, only go so far because they're overused. But to hinge those abstractions to something concrete in the world allows the reader to have a new relationship.
Yeah.
To that idea.
Absolutely, and you guys are both so good at that. The grounding through imagery and metaphor, which then invites the listener into the poems,
Right?
Because that's how we know the world, right? Through our senses and those images. I am also thinking about metaphorical leaps and how in a poem, the poem can surprise us. Getting back to what you commented on, by suddenly taking a whole new direction. Which, and that's something I'm trying to play around with a lot more in my poems. And the fun thing about that is when it surprises you, when you didn't even see it coming at all.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. I love that technique too. Yeah. So good. Okay, thank you. Other questions from you all? Yes, Jim.
Yes, of course, I think we're all grateful for these two poets, or three poets actually.
Thank you.
Major mentioned readers for a poet, and this is a perfect question for Didi. There's a poet who pens poignant grief, personal grief, and reveals unexpected deep costs of trauma. When she speaks those words, are they therapeutic?
Well, the journey has been a long one, and it took me time to get to a space. I mean, I still get choked up about, I'm even here tonight. There's moments where I can choke up a little bit. Hearing the words spoken. Tonight I was choked up on the poem about Brienne, because I haven't read that poem in so long, and it shocks me. My own poem. I know that poem, inside and out.
Yeah.
But early on, I started writing these poems, and in the book, so many of the poems in Moonjar, their origins came, I have to say, from my dear friend Michelle, who I think is watching tonight, who came over to my house, and she got me working. The only thing I could actually do right after my husband's death at that time was cut pictures out of magazines. It was like it was very therapeutic. We made collages, and slowly I started wanting to write words again. But I have to say I was writing around everything. I was not revealing the details. And I'm not, these are poetic details in a lot of ways. I was writing around that grief. I was very afraid of sharing my grief and trauma with an audience. And it took people coming up to me afterwards and saying I needed to hear that poem. I needed I need your book. I need these need to be out in the world. That's what got me to believe that my words were helpful and that I could share them with people. But it's still tough. But I do believe art is cathartic. I 100% believe that. I tell my students that. I don't say I'm a therapist. That my class is not a therapy room by any means. But art, moving through pain and trauma and any kind of suffering. Through art can help us all understand that and understand ourselves a little better because of it, I think. So,
Other questions? Yes, Harvey.
Were you both always very creative and imaginative as children? Or did you kind of grow into that, or did somebody inspire you to take that on?
I love that question. Do you want to answer since
I had some fantastic teachers, but first and foremost, I was a reader. And I think it was the exposure to what I was reading, which was so different. And I've told the stories many times. My grandparents collected books from church basement sales and flea markets. And so we had a bunch of books in the house. And the expectation was that that we would read, and we had reading hour or times but if it was raining and we were inside, we couldn't have the TV on, particularly during the day. So Grandma, all she had to do was there's some books, go read a book. And my first exposure to poetry was picking up a paperback edition of Robert Frost. And I really liked it because the words didn't go from one side of the margin to the other side of the margin. Kind of stayed right in the middle. And it was normally a page, so that if she asked me, did you read? I can say, yes, I read a poem. There you go. But between that experience, I would say the creativity was an accumulation, still, even as an adult, of reading and reading widely and reading vertically, and realizing that if one is going to elbow one's way into it, there's a bar that has been set, not just at the level of craft, but at the level of thinking. And so for me, my models, including Charles Simic, I mean, when I encountered Charles Simic, that surrealist aesthetic entered into my vocabulary, and those impulses of wanting to kind of, have both a humor and also a non-rational grasp of the world really allowed me to grow inside language. And prior to that, it was more storytelling poems, more narrative poems. And that's still an impulse of mine, as you can hear. But I think there's something about moving between different registers of language where one is more representation. I'm going to tell you how things happen as they occurred. And the other is a little bit more, not embellishment, but the imagination can be really, really wild. And I feel like all of us have that inside of us. It needs to be fostered, and it needs to be encouraged, so we don't lose those impulses that we had when we were children, which is why you asked that, right?
I have a quicker summary on that one.
Yours are always quicker than mine.
No, but I felt like I was creative as a kid. Always, I danced when I was young. I did some dance classes and danced in high school and danced in college. And I remember being a point in my life where I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on dancing. I'm going to focus on language. And I thought I was hoping my mind would last longer than my body, maybe. So I gave up the dance and went with the brain. And but I think I was always drawn to, like you, books. Books were always in the house, and I was always reading, writing my own stories or poems when I was little. I mean, little things that were like probably after nursery rhymes or whatever, or making my own nursery rhymes up. So I think I had that creative impulse even young. And then luckily my parents didn't really know what to do with me, but teachers did, and they, helped usher me in the right direction. Yeah.
Actually, I love that. I love how you bring in the other arts, because I absolutely agree with you. I mean, certainly what we love to do, the writing. But yes, any creative art. I mean, I look at it like whether it's dance, whether it's painting, and we're here in this fabulous museum. And by the way, if you haven't seen the current exhibit, you guys all need to see it because it's amazing and it's immersive. So you can be creative while you're enjoying that exhibit. I hope you'll take time to do that at some point. But I think my thought is that regardless of what it is, it's that creative act becomes a kind of expanded kind of a construction of yourself. You know, who we are. It kind of happens in whatever kind of creative art we do, in my opinion, anyway. And I think that's part of the importance. And I think it's also why we all need to really fight for the continuation of the arts in the schools, because I think our kids need that. So, yeah, I wanted to get back to Charles Simic for a minute and ask Kim, Dr. McCrary, where are you? There you are, because you had an experience in your studies with Simic. Would you tell us, everybody, about that?
Yeah, sure. So in my I have various lives. In one of my previous lives, I was a literature professor.
I want to say, excuse me, Kim is in charge of all the programming, all the educational programming here at the museum.
That's
So,
my current evolutionary model. In my previous life as a literature professor, I always loved poetry, and I really was drawn to Simic's poetry. I think partly exactly as Major said, that the surrealist aspect of it, and probably why I'm here at this museum. It's always just been something that naturally attracted me, and I was writing a guide for other teachers who wanted to teach how to read poetry, and I loved his poem about called The Butcher Shop, and I wrote to him. You know, I've always been ballsy, and I said, you know what, I would really like to use this poem, and so I just wrote to him and I said, hey, I'm doing this project, and I'd love to use your poem, and if I have permission. And he just so quickly and graciously responded to me and gave me permission to do that, and so I've always just held that as a very dear and warm memory.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Good, thank you.
That poem of The Butcher Shop has one of the most striking images for me, and this gives you a sense of the pitch of his imagination. He takes the idea of a butcher shop. In fact, you probably even heard it in one of my poems, of the supermarket. I'm thinking about this image where he compares the butchers. What's the thing they don?
The apron?
Apron.
Apron.
And he compares the blood on the apron to various continents where war has taken place. So if you can see that image, it's just a phenomenal, and it's one of those images that kind of lives like a light, like a flame in your mind, kind of burns inside. And I think that's the gorgeous power of language, is that it can impress itself upon you. I think there's also knives in that, well, obvious is a butcher shop, but a butcher block and knives, and he runs this extended metaphor. It's only about 3 or 4 stanzas. I'm gonna start teaching up in here. I better watch out.
It is a
I think there was a
wonderful poem.
question right here. Yeah.
Mine?
Yes.
Well, it actually was regarding that poem, the supermarket, because you were discussing being surreal, using surrealism and also narrative, but that seemed to blend both of those. But you just sort of answered the question.
You predicted. That's good.
Yeah.
Helen,
Yes.
I had
Sterling.
lunch with a Simic one time.
Oh, wow.
It was at a literary convention, probably 79 or 80, and I was with Peter Munson. And of course, the two poets were interested in each other, and I was just kind of the tag along. But he was a fascinating character. He wasn't famous then. I think I remember Peter saying Simic had just had his first poem in the New York.
Oh, interesting.
But you could tell that, I won't say that English was his second language, but that he was speaking in very simple, straightforward prose for the reason that he was learning and experimenting with it a little bit. It was a fascinating experience. He was very, very, as we say now, relatable, very, not at all pretentious in any way.
Yeah, yeah, and his poems. He also uses really very simple language, and his poems are often short. So for those of you who want to check out his work, you'll find that his language is exactly as you just described. But then he has these striking images that just butt up against each other. Some of which are kind of dark, and there's a lot of blood in the butcher shop for obvious reasons. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting and very very surrealistic. Let's see. I'm sorry. Somebody down here, was it Hervey? Yeah, you had a question. Then back there.
I was just focusing on the supermarket poem. It's really fabulous, and the discussion about metaphor, and that metaphoric journey ultimately leads somewhere. And I think in my listener experience, it led to the door hiding the anger behind where the employees were. Only employees could go there. That was a crux moment for me, and the metaphor curved towards it. And for you, in your poem, Didi, about the Bubalink, I think it was the Bubalink poem, where you said God must be exhausted. That struck me as another way to bring the truth in, because it seemed to come in like a bomb rather than like a slow burn. And it was a very clear moment, rather than outside of the flow of the poem. It was very, very fascinating. And it blew me away in that book. It's just both of them were just beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Hervey. Yes, back here. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the supermarket poem too, which I love.
That's good. Yeah.
But I was wondering, when you were writing it, were you thinking at all about Ginsberg or about Dalila? A central idea of American culture. And when you travel, you realize, well, now it's probably more ubiquitous. But a few decades ago, it didn't exist everywhere. There were separate stores. And the supermarket, is kind of a representation of this world of plenty, in American culture.
Thank you for that. I read this poem. I read that poem in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and someone else conjured up Ginsberg, and I hadn't thought about supermarket in America, which is a fantastic.
And Whitman, because
And Whitman. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Hey, I think we should edit an anthology of supermarket poems.
Supermarket literature.
It's a very potent, isn't it? I mean, it's a very, very kind of potent symbol.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's so accessible and it's right there. But even the compartmentalization and the appearance of plenty and bounty juxtaposed with, and you can see this sometimes when you walk into a store, and we saw this in California. I couldn't believe, like I really it hit me. But but people are sad sometimes, and you can kind of feel it. Feel it there. You think with all the light hitting the fruit and the spray, make sure the vegetables look like they were just picked. But sometimes you can feel it, and the extended conceit was fun to kind of map out and think about it. Like, what else am I going to draw in? I have to admit, it does need editing. Like, I want to.
It's so good, and some of the language felt like bound, bound home.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think an anthology sounds like a great idea.
Right.
Actually, Peter Meinke, he has a fabulous supermarket poem also.
Okay,
Yeah, from one of his early books.
I gotta find it.
Yeah.
I actually do have one from
Yes, Nancy.
the paper, I think.
So, I'm a very bad poet, but all my poems rhyme. And I noticed, Major, that your first poem was a rhyming poem.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, do you start a poem and say, this is going to be a rhyming poet? Is this going to be a poem that just comes from, within and is like, has no real structure, but conveys a feeling? So, and I was wondering if, Didi, if you ever do a rhyming poem, and are they like considered bad to do, or is it just a style that you have?
That's a great question
Yeah.
because it gets to talking about form, and there was no way I was going to let you guys leave tonight without talking about form. So thank you, Nancy. Yeah.
Well, I don't write in rhyme. I pay attention to sound, of course, within the lines and between the lines and all of that, but I don't write in rhyme. But I think it's perfectly wonderful to write in rhyme. And I'm not going to speak for you, even though I have an idea. I could almost answer that question for you, but but my major does,
Yeah.
and a lot actually. Yeah. So I think it's a great thing. It's not form is a little more difficult for me, but yeah.
I do, but it's more like the lemon zester in your in your drawer. You know that flat lemon zester. You know that's me in rhyme. I'm just like.
That's a great
Very good.
But all that to say, it's a tool, and for me, I don't believe. There's some poems that do require, for me at least, a more deliberate attention to what that intentional kind of sonic layering can do for the subject matter. And I currently have a project that kind of keeps my ear fresh in that direction. But I want to say they're not bad, and I don't think, to go to the heart of your question, writing rhyming poems is not a bad thing. In fact, I almost said, I read that first poem intentionally, mainly just to treat it like a tuning fork, because that way you can hear the nuances of the language that comes afterward. I do think it's a mistake to believe that the rhyming makes it a poem, because then that's at the expense of other kind of possibilities of the poem growing, or for the reader to kind of appreciate. You can turn up the volume on that rhyme. I'm normally, if I do rhyme, I'm rhyming at a slant or at a side angle. That's and so that when I do rhyme like wire with fire, it's a very, it's almost like, the gong,
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to me that it's another tool for your toolbox. It's as a poet, I think the sounds of our poems, and I've read interviews that you've done, Major. I know how important the sound work in a poem is for you, the music of the poem. But it's created in lots of ways, and it doesn't have to be the end rhyme, although it can be, as long as the whole poem isn't written around it. You don't want it to be Yoda speech, just to get the rhyme. But yeah, slant rhyme, off rhyme, assonance, the chiming of the vowels or the chiming of the consonants for the the alliteration. There's so many different ways to make music, and I think they're important. Yeah. But your poems, even though you're not following a particular form, the words that you've put together, and I think part of it for me probably is because of the strength of your imagery. There are always interesting sounds going on in your poems, even if they're not in a particular form.
Right. I'm very aware of sound.
Yeah.
Like what you did,
You
all
are.
the things you just said, assonance, consonants.
Yeah.
And I love that you said chiming, the chiming of vowels and the chiming of consonants.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And even how you
Very
end your
aware of that.
lines, right? Because you create that pause at the end of a line that adds to the music of the poem and the flow of the poem. So yeah, it's a good question. Nancy. Yeah. But I'm very grateful for your use of form when I see it, the poems that you choose to do it. In Major's book, The Absurd Man, you've got that whole section in the middle that is they're elongated sonnets, basically. Most of them 18 lines, right?
That's
Not
right.
14.
That's right.
And a lot of slant rhyme going on, inner rhyme going on, and alliteration. But then you have the, if I remember correctly, the last two lines are typically rhymed, right?
Rhyming couplets,
Yeah, rhyming
close it
like
down.
couplets. Yeah.
That's great.
That's a
Wow.
wonderful. But here's the thing. Even though you've done that, when you read those poems aloud, they sound so natural. You don't want to sound, if you can avoid it, too much like a Hallmark card, and you avoid that completely. And there's so many interesting things to say about that probably that would be beyond our time. But I am interested in how you do that, because it's a very natural flow. It's like conversation, even though you choose to use that rhyme.
Would you like to have dinner tonight? We're actually going to dinner.
Yeah,
we could talk it over.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Back here, and then Harvey, maybe 1.5. How about that? Yes, back here.
So my
question's sort of related to what you're just talking about, and it goes back to Charles Simic as well. You guys are both such great readers, and I was rapt listening to you, and everybody else was too. When I first, and I guess my question is there certain kinds of poems which are meant to be read on the page, and other kinds of poems which are meant to be read aloud? When I first encountered Charles Simic, he just blew my mind. I was studying creative writing in Boulder, Colorado, getting my master's degree, and I was writing fiction actually, and I just loved the language. I didn't know what it was about. It was the one of, I can't remember the title, but it was the one about, he wrote about the war. His mother was afraid of smoke. You know, that book or collection. I think he won an award for it. And so when I was living in Santa Fe later, I got the opportunity to see him read, and I thought, oh, this is going to be amazing. And when he read, it was flat. Nobody reacted to what he was reading. He wasn't, I don't know, maybe he wasn't a good reader. But, and then I saw people like Billy Collins, who was the poet laureate at the time, and the audience was howling. And then, you know, he was poet laureate a couple of times in a row. And my question is, what do we do with that? Because sometimes I feel like the poetry I write is on the page. I try to read it out loud, and that's good too, but there's something to be said for the visual appearance of a poem and the language, and reading it alone, for example.
Good question.
That's a very good question. I'm sitting here thinking how I can dodge it.
I mean, I was gonna say, to be honest, I do think there are poems that are
That should
on the
be on
page,
page, yeah.
and then there are poems that are
Yeah.
better out loud. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
I have. I mean, there's some poems I don't really ever read. I don't really know for what reason, but maybe it's truly they just aren't really great out loud poems, and some just lend themselves to be that.
Yeah.
So I do think there is truth to that. Also, reading and different styles of reading, and I mean, not that Charlie didn't teach, but like teaching, maybe teaching high school, and trying to always get those students excited, that might lend to a personality that I bring to the reading versus maybe someone else. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm afraid to kind of make the big claim on that. Like I know
Well,
you're saying, like
I
one way or
learned
the
the
other.
hard way. I mean, there were poems that I put in months writing these poems, and I really want people to hear it, and it didn't do anything for them. And I think it was because of the density of, I'm thinking of, was it Shelley that wrote Hymn on Intellectual Beauty? That's what it is. It's a hymn, and it's kind of beautiful in your mind and all of that. But not all, I truly believe not all poems, just like there are plays that are not meant to be, there were a number of plays that were produced that was never staged. But Charles Simic, I kind of agree with you there. And that's it, it's its own other skill set. The relationship between you to your work. And I think it has to do, at least what I tell my students is that, and this is not Simic, but just all the students that I've had over the years, you have to have that, you have to believe in the work and present it in such a way that, that readers or people listening can engage with it beyond its ideas. And that's why the sound is really important to me, because you're not going to get all of it, but you may hear the tonality of it, or you may even remember the passion behind it. But that relationship is almost two separate areas. Interestingly enough.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to say, even if the poem winds up being a poem that ultimately is a little better on the page, I'm a big believer in reading them out loud, even in the drafting process.
That's right.
Even when you're writing them,
Yeah.
read them out loud. You may that poem may become what you're talking about, which is just better on the page, and that's fine. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's because I think my ear picks up things that my eye won't. So I've come to trust that. So I don't know.
Well, not that civic is this way, but there's some poets where the visual is very important, or the punctuation, or something to be said about, it can still be read aloud, but reading it on the page can
It can
a
add
lot
to
of
it.
meaning to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good.
I've been having Siri read my poems.
Really? I've never heard of that.
Siri,
Stop.
read my poem.
She do it?
Yeah, right.
That would be a great title. Yeah, you got to write that one. Well, thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Didi and Michael. Thank you.
I thought maybe you really did that.
Say that again?
I thought you really maybe really did that.
Oh, no. That goes-